Thank you, Melda. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Öykü Özsoy and I'm the Chief Curator at Istanbul Modern. It's a pleasure to collaborate with the Royal College of Art in London and welcome all participants for today's webinar, the first event of Crafting Technology for Textiles. This new project is inspired by Istanbul Modern's former and ongoing programs, which have been creating encounters between design, new technologies, art, and crafts for the better half of the past decade. These events will create an interdisciplinary design network between the United Kingdom and Turkey. Hopefully, this network will explore a creative and sustainable future for craft-based textile. Today, we are hosting the project's first panel discussion, Thinking Through Making Soft Systems. The panel features members of RCA's Textile Soft Systems Research Group, who will speak about new developments on the physical attributes of textiles, soft materials, and digital assembly technologies. I'd like to thank Antumi, Head of Textile Program at Royal College of Art, and Associate Professor Dr. Elif Özden Yenigün, Senior Tutor in Textile Program, Royal College of Art, to make this invaluable project happen, and all the panelists here today who will share their experience with us. I'd also like to thank my two colleagues at Istanbul Modern, the Social Project Manager Melda Tütüncüoğlu and the Assistant Curator Melody Gülbaba, who have coordinated details of the project with RCA team. And last but not least, we would like to thank Art and Humanities Research Council and Newton Fund, whose generous contribution made this project possible. Before watching Elif Özden Yenigün's presentation, a kind reminder, if you have any questions during the presentations, please type them into the question box in your control panel. There will be a Q&A session at the end, moderated by Dr. Berdan Kalav from the Faculty of Textile Technologies Design at Istanbul Technical University. I hope you enjoy the panel and thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Elif Özden Yenigün, a senior tutor in textiles at Royal College of Art. I would like to first thank the amazing Istanbul Modern team, Öykü Özsoy, Melda Tütüncüoğlu, and Melody Gülbaba, and our panelists today, Dr. Lynne Tandler and Tumi, Dr. Amy Winters, and our moderator, Dr. Berdan Kalav. And Tumi and Dr. Amy Winters are also part of the project team, so as the PI, I'm thankful for their contribution to this project. To explain why we put this networking ground into our research agenda and why it is important for our research and how it might be for creative individuals in Turkey, I will briefly talk about crafting technology for textile project funded by AHRC and Newton Fund. The project has a specialism named Soft Systems at the Royal College of Art. In a relatively short time, I believe we embrace a broad base of interdisciplinary research and engage with material and technology developers to bring up a new understanding of technology embedment in textile practice. We work closely with many academic institutions and industrial partners and organizations such as MADE and Craft Council. The research team and the students enrolled in this specialism explored soft material world. So they develop innovative processes, surfaces, structures, and soft systems to form products that reimagine our relationship with materials. To explain this new technological landscape, I will show you a couple of reference projects that we managed in the last 2 years. We engage with several industrial partners such as DZP Technologies, NSG Glass, Footfalls and Heartbeat, and organize hands-on demonstrations and studio workshops so that the students can explore the latest advancement in material-led technologies such as graphene conductive inks and fiber optics. For instance, if we seek a deep understanding of smart ways of using materials in e-textiles, to overcome prospective challenges in variable technologies, such as the disruption of softness and the lightness of fabrics when they incorporate electronics. The context of the work varies, it doesn't have to be variable. So we created a tailorable platform to respond to the specific needs of students. As a soft systems research group, we contributed to several research projects. Fairspace Consortium that tackles human-robot interface and extra vehicle suits in space are another example that we use thinking through making approach in a new scientific territory. How does the craft have place in soft systems? I will show you a couple of student projects in a gallery context that use technology as an engagement tool with the visitors. Shiai's work presented here used light and proximity sensors to interact with the visitors in the exhibition space, to simulate a dialogue with God, to create responsiveness in her showcase. Seeing work is a good example how they crafted the technology in a more playful manner. It doesn't have to be advanced or requires mastering any skills. These workshops articulate STEM practice, a textile art and design-led approach to STEM innovation, and a new hands-on engagement with soft materials and technology. We are very excited to start this collaborative project with Istanbul Modern, Turkey's first and largest museum of modern and contemporary art. Istanbul Modern has already an international artist network and artist in residency program, rooting in the traditional Turkish craft. So again, expanding our network to these existing links will bring another perspective and another layer of creation and technology. The new build community that will be led by RCA and Istanbul Modern hopefully will grow and reach the creative individuals and communities to dive into finding a sustainable future for Turkish craft. The primary goal of this project is to establish an interdisciplinary network that can tackle how to bridge between the heritage craft and the 21st century technology in textile making. Thus, we began asking the question of how we can employ thinking through making approach in textile practice, fitted with the boundaries of technology. This project is another learning. This is a 9-month project, so we put a list of networking and learning activities to contemporary textile practice. We aim to facilitate a cross-pollinated online environment for everyone that is interested in collaborative creating experience. It starts with today's panel discussion on thinking through making soft systems. We will offer crafting technology workshops by focusing on creating innovation through the transformation of material through craft. You may find many free workshop opportunities on the museum website in the upcoming days. We will also organize a closing up and ideation workshop for future steps to discuss how effectively the scope and the depth of smart designing craft could be built by networking. This project is another learning and teaching pit stop for us to gather scientists, practitioners, and designers in soft system research. We had a good experience in engaging with several creative centers located in Paris, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. We are so excited to work with Istanbul Modern. We appreciate our project funder, AHRC and Newton Fund, to support this network. Thank you all for listening, and we will be happy to answer if you have any questions. Hi, everyone. I would like to invite Dr. Berdan Kalab to the Zoom stage as our moderator in Thinking Through Making Soft Systems panel discussion. Dr. Kalab is a faculty member at the Faculty of Textile Technologies and Design in Istanbul Technical University, and he is a diligent academic focusing on printing Turkish block printing. Berdan, floor is yours.
Thank you, Elif. As she said, I'm lecturer in Textile Engineering Department in Istanbul Technical University. I study mostly on printing, especially in inkjet printing. and hence I teach in these areas. Today I will moderate the panel, but before starting the panel, during the presentations, please feel free to drop your question to Q&A box. At the end of the panel, the panelists would love to answer these questions. So now I would like to present our first panelist, Anne Toomey, Head of Textiles Program at Royal College of Art. Anne has established the Soft System Research Group at the RCA. She leads a team of expert specialist staff and over 130 postgraduate students working at the creative interface between materials, making, and meaning. The focus of the team is innovation that impacts and spans across many sectors, exploring new territories for the 21st century textile specialists. Now I leave the stage to Anne and her presentation titled Surface, Structures, and Soft Systems, Decoding and Recoding, New Materials and Methods for Textiles.
Hello, I'm Anne Toomey, Head of Textiles at the Royal College of Art. Soft systems is an approach that we use in textiles at the Royal College of Art to question the current and future materiality of our lives and our individual and collective relationships therein. Essentially, it is an approach that recognises the complexities of our material world and our relationship with it, and uses this as a platform for exploration and innovation. Established in 2017, we are building a networked community of practitioners, academics, researchers, and industry partners who share these interests as we build new knowledge from new ways of thinking through making. New types of materials with new characteristics and behaviours offer unprecedented opportunities to rethink our bidirectional relationship between ourselves and our habitat. In looking forward, we must not forget to look back and question and challenge the things we think we already know with this new viewpoint. Can new opportunities be found in rethinking the traditional? In decoding and recoding tradition, we can mine a vast data bank of knowledge and heritage as we step into future territories. Within the group, we rethink materials and fabrication processes to discover new applications. It is this act of decoding and recoding that helps us to think of these new applications as soft textile systems for the 21st century. These possibilities, when connected and related through the soft materiality of textiles, present new opportunities to challenge the boundaries of our current understanding of textile as passive and inanimate, and usher us into a new era of intelligent surfaces, structures, and soft systems. For example, this slide illustrates the potential for textiles as an interface and mediator between our physical and digital worlds in the developing domain of artificial intelligence. It demonstrates the important role of textiles within this connected system between ourselves and the world that we live in. Here are two examples of recent projects that take a soft systems approach. CraftTech was a collaborative project between RCA and the Institute of Textiles and Clothing at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Its aim is to interrogate the crafting of materials associated with wearable technologies. Within the project, we specifically wanted to explore and exploit the characteristics of textile design practice to uncover new constructs for interactive textiles. In developing new thinking through making, we used a mixed approach to construction and material manipulation that included a variety of techniques, including basketry, knitting, casting, and etching, alongside basic electronics. The project uncovered further insights into the value of material exploration, thinking through making, and craft approaches, and how these practices are relevant within a technological field. S++ was a collaborative project between RCA Textiles and the Design Lab at the Kyoto Institute of Technology. Its aim was to re-engineer traditional chirimen kimono silk. Starting with a 5-day international interdisciplinary workshop and followed by a 6-month design associates program, co-supervised by myself and Professor Julia Cassin, there were 2 key questions central to the project. Firstly, can cherry-man fabric be re-engineered and combined with bioplastics to create a textile that meets the functional requirements of challenging healthcare contexts? And secondly, can the new design scenarios opened up by this resulting new material help revitalise the silk textile industry and enable the retention of its skills and knowledge base? This particular silk has a unique structure utilising both Z and S twists to create a crimp that is further enhanced by a very specific finishing process. We hacked the traditional silk weave by partially substituting PTT, a thermoplastic polymer, and enabled the creation of a hybrid textile which is simultaneously hydrophilic and hydrophobic. This hybrid textile structure offers a new product application for this specialist silk in healthcare contexts, and this is set against a background of industry decline and shrinking markets for this highly sophisticated textile. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Anne, for your presentation. Now, let me present our second panelist, Dr. Lynne Tandler. Dr. Tandler is a tutor for yarn and woven textiles in Royal College of Art. After graduation from Central St. Martin's with BA degree in textile weave and print in 2008, Dr. Tandler earned her MA degree in constructed textiles from RCA in 2010. She completed her PhD about the role of weaving in smart materials, and her academic research now examines past, present, and future of woven textiles and their relevance to smart textiles innovations. Now we are looking forward to hearing more her practice today, and her presentation will be about the role of weaving in smart materials systems.
Hello, my name is Lynne Tandler. I am a weaver and an academic. Also, as just mentioned, I'm the tutor for yarn and woven textiles on the MA Textiles course at the Royal College of Art. And presently, I'm also the co-editor of the second volume about weaving in the new Encyclopedia of World Textiles. First, I'd like to thank the wonderful team for having me. I will spend the next few minutes introducing some elements from my research and discuss my own interpretations of the idea of soft systems and how I see them as a weaver, and also just briefly perhaps talk about the ways in which weaving can potentially help advance this area of research further. So my academic research stems from questions regarding the term smart and what it means to textiles. So how do smart materials relate to textiles, and how can we design and further explore this field through textile methodologies? Originally, smart textiles and smart materials for a very long time were considered pretty much the same thing. Here we have the first attempt at describing smart textiles and their properties. This is by Xuaming Tao from 2001. And here, and since, smartness has been described as different degrees of responsive behavior. Only in this case of textile, in the case of textiles, there is a problem. And that is that to some extent, all natural fibers are also responsive to a variety of external stimuli, which leave us with a question of whether they should be considered smart as well, or otherwise, when should something responsive be considered as smart? My research since beginning my PhD has been governed by a design STEM or DSTEM research methodology as described by Veronica Capsali and Anne Toomey in 2014. And with relevance to this research, if we look into the area of computing and electronics, for example, smartness is often associated with artificial intelligence, where electronics are used to create synthetic brains. But in biology, smartness is perceived as a sophisticated sensory system instead, with many references to a single cell that, while it has no brain, it is still perceived as smart. And this idea led me to look into how the individual components of textiles or within textiles can be used to create a new multisensory system. So this was my initial response to this question, and it is inspired by principle of structural hierarchy as described by Roderick Lakes. It outlines all the various components and processes that we use to create constructed textiles. And it shows just how complex each piece of textiles really is. But more importantly, what this map demonstrates is that in fact textiles are not just one material, although we often perceive them as such, but rather an assembly of many different materials with various degrees of responsiveness amongst them that together form a system. Now, if we go back and look at fields of electronics, we will find that researchers have long argued that no one single material could ever be considered smart, only systems can, which is really interesting, especially with regard to textiles and through this lens. And that brings me to weaving, because if smartness can only occur in systems, then surely the ways in which we put these systems together should have an impact on the performance of the system as a whole. And that really what guides my practice, my academic research and my teaching. I look specifically into the ways in which we use weaving to link materials together. That involves hacking into looms, modifying new tools for weaving that can create new structure potentials, very much breaking away from behaviorist weaving methods and the effect that such a dissociative approach could have on creativity and the production of new structures and applications. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Lynn, for joining us today. So our final panelist today is an amazing creative talent, Dr. Amy Winters. She is the founder of material technology studio Rainbow Winters. She got her PhD degree in interactive textile from Royal College of Art in 2017 and BA in performance design from Central St. Martin's in 2006. She is now a postdoctoral researcher at the Future Everyday Group, Industrial Design in Eindhoven University of Technology, and currently explores performance principles such as temporal form towards interactive materials and soft robotic systems. She also worked as a tutor on the soft systems specialism before joining Eindhoven University of Technology.
Hi, my name is Amy Winters. I am currently a postdoc researcher at the Future Everyday Group TUE in the Netherlands. I am now supporting the Interactive Materiality research line, where I conduct design research on interaction with smart materials such as soft robotics. Here, principles found in the performing arts, such as film, music, and dance, are translated into design tools, such as temporal form. I am the founder of the material technology studio Rainbow Winters, and a PhD graduate of the Royal College of Art. Originally, I trained in performance design at Central St. Martin's. At Rainbow Winters, I developed interactive textiles which respond to external influences such as light, sound, speed, and moisture. The sound-reactive thunderstorm dress was conceived in 2010 and turned the wearer into a living thunderstorm with the aim of creating visual music, and was acquired nearly a decade later by the Museum of Science and Industry Chicago's permanent collection. I undertook my PhD in textiles at the RCA and identified a design-led approach to the invention of programmable materials and soft robotics. Here, I advanced an agenda of soft interaction qualities through making. I explored how an experiential route of thinking through materials can establish an alternative type of knowledge, a knowledge which is not necessarily problem-driven or user-centered. Here, reflective practice can uncover problems which would otherwise have stayed hidden, whilst at the same time generating new concepts and ideas to support knowledge sharing. My PhD work specifically focused on interactive materials assembled from bioengineered technologies such as electroactive polymers, in this water lily, which responded to sound, and pneumatic and hydraulic actuator systems, such as tangible microfluidics. For me, soft systems affords the ability to work with multiple material properties to create emotionally engaging interactions and thinking through physical prototyping and bodily engagement with materials. These novel actuators, such as fluidic textiles, can thus be seen as an expressive medium in themselves. I have actively worked on the soft systems pathway in MA Textile Design at the RCA, and a vital part of the learning experience is thinking through prototyping. Designers are encouraged to use materiality from the start of their design process rather than as an add-on. The inherent multidisciplinary qualities of soft systems, which for me sits between materiality, interaction, and material science, are inspiring in an evolving field of post-digital design for material-led researchers. Firstly, through tactile sensory languages, where textiles, fashion, industrial and interaction design can open up new applications. For our masterclasses, for example, we work with anything from sustainable nanotechnology to printed electronics, where novel binders, inks, and print could combine to develop not only aesthetic qualities, but also functionality and cultural currency. Manufacturing processes such as 3D printing, laser cutting, and off-the-shelf electronics have become even more accessible. This is driving the development and future possibilities of soft, interactive materials, breaking down barriers between the experts and non-experts. I reframe the neoteric textile designer as a hacker, a bricklayer, and an alchemist. This way, we create a complementary strand of R&D strategy, and in doing so, we move towards the creation of our own disruptive technology, holding not only functional values, but also cultural ones. Thank you for listening, and more of my work and approach can be seen through my website, Rainbow Winters.
Thank you, Amy, for your presentation. Now I will start the question and answer session. You can drop your questions, or you can write your question to Q&A box if you want. So we will follow from there. Please don't write your question to the chat because we may not see the questions from chat. So that will be better to see all the questions in Q&A box. So actually, I want to start the Q&A session with a question. And I want to ask to Lynn here. Lynn, what type of challenges you came across when you were dealing with the materials that you were studying?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it depends for what application. I suppose when the idea, particularly here when I was trying to frame around soft systems, is how we really perceive the anatomy of textiles and the difference between textiles and materials. And of course, the biggest challenge that I found is actually in the structuring methods, because what I found particularly with future textiles or smart textiles is that we often try to use cutting edge materials, so nanofibers and microscopic materials, but then we use actually centuries old machines when it comes to weaving. So there's a disparity between the advancement of the material itself that we use in the components, but actually the construction methodology are still very, very ancient. So that I think was the biggest challenge that I found, and what continues to inspire my work.
Thank you for the answer. And Amy, maybe you also maybe you faced with some challenges because you're a designer, and I really want to hear the same question from you.
Yeah, so there are a variety of different challenges. I mean, I would say the largest challenge is scaling up. When you're working with classical textiles, you almost have the freedom because you know how the machines work. When you work with laboratories, sometimes things are really, really tiny, and you have to have a leap of imagination to show that they could be applied somehow. And also, some things are not quite as complex as you think. You don't necessarily need labs. Sometimes all you need is makerspace environments. You know, as long as you know your 3D printing and your laser cutting, sometimes you can replicate these so-called complicated papers into something which is quite accessible. And that's what I always try to teach my students during soft systems, that they were able to have the confidence and be empowered to do things themselves.
Thank you. Now I want to ask a question to Anne. And why did you name soft systems to this new textile specialism?
Well, originally, it was meant to be smart textiles, and my bosses at the time were very keen to call it smart textiles, but I felt very strongly that there was far more scope to this than the field of smart textiles and how that was understood, and that actually, if we were to break new ground and become broader in our thinking, we needed to drop the smartness, because that in some way held us back. Although so much of it is smart, and it started with that idea, but it has gone on to become so much more. And the smartness has just become a sort of another everyday, tool and part of the sort of the palette of choice, if you like. It's more about the relationship thinking in there.
Okay, thank you. And how important is collaboration in your practice or research? And
for me, collaboration is really essential, and I guess it really characterizes the work that I do. I'm an expert in a small area of work, and in order to bring these things together, I need experts in their fields and to come together to address the questions that we want to address. And as Amy says, that not everything is problem driven. We don't always embark on trying to solve a problem necessarily. It might be an exploration and a question about expanding our practice, but I find that it's beneficial to have a number of people and different viewpoints, and that's part of this network, the reason for this network as well.
Thank you. Let me check if there is a question from question and answer. Oh yes, we have a question from Untitled. As fashion industry is seen as one of the biggest industries to create environmental challenges, how do you think these new technologies could support sustainability and even the upcycling of existing materials? Maybe, and you can answer this question, or maybe Lynn, maybe, I don't know.
I'm happy to answer that. I think, again, this is a space for really intensive collaboration. And there's some colleagues at the Royal College have actually just recently won a very significant funding grant to bring together a very, very, very complicated chain to look at the upcycling of bio waste and food waste for textiles, and to create new materials to make things with for the fashion and textile industry. And I think it's a really good example of the complexity of the fashion and textile supply chain, and how complex and necessarily complex it is to bring together these experts from different fields. And the PI on this is Professor Sharon Borley in the Materials Research Centre. And it's a very exciting initiative, and we hope that it will have great impact on the fashion and textiles industry.
Thank you. I want to ask a question to Lynn, actually. Well, while we are designing or creating these smart textiles, we add some different materials to the textile, actually. So what do you think about the recycling of these materials? Because recycling textile is somehow, it's easier, but when you add or when you make it more complex, or let's say impure, the recycling will be getting harder. So what do you think about this?
I think you're exactly right. It's a huge problem, and the huge problem really is in that world of composites that you get, as you said, the impure. That if you have 100% silk or 100% wool, 100% cotton, it's very easy. 100% polyester, it's very easy to recycle it. But what happened? I suppose that's the hardest problem that we have with electronics. it's very, very difficult to recycle them. I think removing, I think Elif's work is absolutely brilliant in sort of also paving the way of actually creating nanofibers that are recyclable or can be made recyclable. And I think if we also look at it in terms of structuring the system itself, so looking at the system, I suppose, more holistically, rather than an independent component and then a post-structuring methods. So if we look at the whole system holistically, when we design, we can work, this is definitely the ambition, to create multi-component recyclable textiles.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question from question and answer. Ümit Mesci asked a question, and I will ask this question to Amy, actually. Our digitalization journey accelerates with the pandemic, and I was wondering how the material research methodologies would evolve, asked Ümit Mesci.
Okay, great. Yes, that's a great question. So I believe, yes, our journey into digitalization is accelerating at a really fast pace, but we also really need to be careful that this doesn't take over and that we also keep within the physical. So we know, for example, AI is taking over, but we need to think about things like physical AI, because really it'll be our shared experiences with each other, and not only dealing with one sense, our eyes, but dealing with all our senses, which will matter.
Thank you. I will continue to ask you this question because it's an interesting question. So a little bit longer. I'm an industrial product and interaction designer, but I have worked with also fashion designers over several workshops for making smart wearables. The education of industrial product design has shifted from form or shape design to interaction design heavily in the past years, but material exploration and thinking through making is even more crucial in the design of soft materials or garments. Oğuz is curious about how the garment design education shifted and if the technological literacy gap still have an impact on the adoption of computational materials in the design process of soft systems. And if so, what are the steps towards decreasing this gap, and what can design and engineering fields can do for it? This is a good question from Oğuz.
Would you like me to answer that?
Oh yeah.
Shall I start? Yeah, okay, because I'm working directly in that field.
Yes.
So yeah, my background's from theatre design, and then I worked obviously in soft systems and textiles for a while, and now I'm set in the interaction design department. And it really is about language barriers and understanding that both methodologies count. So for example, interaction design methodologies are just as nuanced as textile design methodologies. And it's really about having respect for both, but also coming together with a common language. But rather than forcing each discipline to understand the language, coming up with something universal. And I know the challenges myself from teaching in soft systems. It has to be relevant and relatable and relational to your subject matter. So there's no point in pushing, very technically driven papers unless there is a reason for it. So I always advocate for accessibility when it comes to education in that part.
Okay, thank you. Derya Ajuner asked a question. I will ask this question three of you. I mean, whoever wants to answer, you can answer it. So Derya Ajuner, thanks for the presentations. And she says that she is curious about the outcomes of workshops realized with people who are not from the field. Number or at least visibility of such making workshops combining textiles and technology has been increasing, but are there monitoring and evaluation processes? Do we know what long-term experiences of participants of such workshops are? Is the question of Derya Ajuner. Who wants to reply? Maybe. Okay, Aim.
I'll start with that and then hand over to Lynn. I think that it's really hard to evaluate something that whilst you're in the middle of it, and that this is emerging practice. We are developing it as we're going along. The community that are working in it are all part and parcel of the development of that. So it's hard to predict exactly what that shape really looks like, because it needs to be shaped by the people who are working within it. You can't say that's what the future looks like. We must all go towards that goal. This is a shared development, and we know that it's taking us forward. In terms of evaluating whether it's successful or not, how does one evaluate success? What is success? What does it look like? Is it about industrial commercial success? Is it about you know, a kind of monetary value? Is it about you know, environmental, ecological success? Is it about, you know, helping our planet to heal itself? You know, what is that success? What are the measures for it? So I think those we all define for ourselves through our own values as we progress. I'm happy to hand over to Lynn and Amy for their views on this.
I think exactly right. I'll probably the only thing I'd maybe add from my perspective is that very much also what we do is and what we're trying to advocate for is that design STEM, that sort of cross-disciplinary, co-conversational topics that and what we find is and that's something that Anne with her colleague at the time, with Veronica Kapsali, have set up and established, and what we find is actually there is a language barrier also between the two fields always, very different methodologies, very different understanding of materials, and very different understanding of the theories that led them. So a lot of it is an ongoing, I suppose, establishing that landscape of constant conversation, being very open-minded, to have your minds changed, to learn new things, to learn to work in new things, to adopt new tools from other disciplines and try to put a spin on them. But I suppose all of it is through, as we say, that sort of thinking through making. What it means is actually just having a reflective practice. And whilst it's very difficult to assess something when you're in the middle of it, it's just, I suppose we're just trying to be in tune to find new outcomes and I suppose to experiment more and just find other original contributions to the field. I don't know if Amy would like to add anything.
Yes, Amy.
Yes, I mean, I would say, picking up from your note, Lynn, on the different methodologies, I think it's also about attributing value to certain methodologies which come through thinking through making, and valuing. It's not just aesthetics. Everyone keeps thinking that often textiles is just aesthetics. It's so much more than that. It's so much richer than that. It really is. It's cultural currency. That's basically, it's the cool factor. Cool is cultural currency. And, you know, that actually can be quantifiable. That can sell. So it's about attributing also a commercial and societal value to textiles methodologies, which could then be implemented in a wider eco-scheme. Yeah, that's my viewpoint on it.
Thank you. And you actually talk about the emerging technologies. So what new technology is foreseen that will be intersected with the craft? Do you think? What do you think about this?
Well, I think one of the things that's been interesting about some of the materials and things that we've explored is the way that they can be manipulated in a similar way and a familiar way that the textile practitioner already employs. So things that they're using with their hands. It goes back to something that Amy was talking about earlier, where things don't necessarily have to be in the domain of a lab, that you can make these things accessible. So for us, it's around the things that are soft, because we generally work with soft materials and soft stuff. We're very familiar with that. It's accessible, achievable. So we've really started with things that are soft to incorporate into the ways that we make and the ways that we interrogate and explore things, because it's a simple, accessible pathway to do that.
Okay, thank you. We have a question. So Seren Sarıel asks this question. Do you have any suggestion on how students who develop soft textile concepts can approach collaborators like scientists and engineers to realize their textile projects and how they can continue to production of their results of thinking through making. And you can start. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go on.
Oh,
go
please,
ahead.
please go ahead. Go ahead. You please go.
Oh
ahead.
no, I'm only because it's a question that I had at the start of my career, so I thought maybe that. Yeah.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So initially, it really is being experimental and developing a bit of a portfolio. So essentially, if you're trying to work with someone, like anyone, you have to pitch. So developing what your value proposition is, and then pitching this idea. Not every single engineer and scientist is the same. Sometimes we stereotype them. Some are more open than others. Some are very creative. So you have to approach who you want to approach, and don't be let down. You know, if someone rejects you, who cares? Move on to the next person. You have to be quite thick-skinned, but offer your value, and then you can start the collaboration from there. And I mean, I approached many different universities, many different companies, and I saw it as more of an extension of my tools. Yeah, so that's the best way of approaching it. And then you'll start to begin to get a name for yourself. And often, you know, it's quite a small world. Other engineers might recommend your skills to other people that they know. So, but we've all got to start from somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I want to combine this question with another one to you, Amy. Any recommendations for new artists, designers, and engineers to pursue their dreams, like find funding or care-wise?
So how to approach funders, is this the question?
Yeah, or any recommendations for new artists, designers, engineers to pursue their dreams?
To pursue their dreams?
Yes.
Yes, I mean, I think there are several different competitions which are open, and there are several different grants. So when I started, we had something a long time ago called the Technology Strategy Board, which I applied for, and that initially gave me a chunk of money to develop my ideas. But there's also smaller scale projects like the Worth Project, which Sarah Robertson was also part of, who's on the team of Soft Systems. And I think Anne and Lynn, you might also have some suggestions for many of the competitions that Soft Systems students went on, for example, at the Innovation Centre at the RCA as well.
Thank you. We have a question from Nigel. Do the panelists feel that we have to overprove ourselves within practice-based or led research, particularly soft material-oriented work, perhaps in comparison to other research fields like humanities, theoretical, critical, hard materials, or industrial, and also with respect to funding would be helpful to understand. So, and also Nigel, thanks to you. So this is the question.
I'm happy to take this one. Thank you very much for your question, Nigel. The answer is yes, we do have to overprove ourselves constantly. It's a source of frustration within my team, with the way that our approach is understood or misunderstood by sort of, you know, quite close, you know, close positioning, if you like. So with regards to funding, how does one overcome that? I wish I had an answer for you for that, and I'd probably be in a different place if I did have the answer for that. I think persistence is one of those. Building, again, it's building that evidence base where things matter. And going back to some of Amy's comments that she made earlier about how does one demonstrate values of things. So I don't think it's a battle that will end soon either. I think it just needs more and more people to recognize the value of it, to work in that space. So, you know, the bigger our network and the more powerful that voice becomes, the better it is. But I know we've had to overcome some of these types of hurdles, even within the collaborative working within college and within projects that we've done, and that sort of respect for such different types of practice, different types of ways of developing new knowledge is something that still has quite a way to go.
Thank you. We have actually 2 questions from chat and 1 question from question and answer. So I'm going to go with the chat. I will actually, this is in Turkish. So, bu bilimsel çalışmalar henüz bir tasarıma dahil olmamış değil mi diye bir sorumuz var. Muhtemelen bunu çevirecekler.
These these researches have not been fully transformed into a scientific research or a scientific article or scientific literature yet. Is that right? All of the ongoing studies which you have just mentioned, have they been transformed into a specific literature within this field?
Can you get the question in English?
Could you hear me? Could you hear me?
Yes. So I think if I understand the question correctly, if you're asking if we're making a transition from a sort of art and design space into a scientific space, and the answer would be that's not our intention at all. Our intention is to expand the art and design space, and that we're broadening our position in that, and that it's a more inclusive space where it isn't art and design or science, but it's more of a collaborative, joined and shared space. But we're not trying to become scientists in this. We're very much trying to use the strength that we have from an art and design position to work with people who have strengths in their fields to generate new knowledge and generate new territories. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's a good answer. Lynn, I want to ask a question to you. And how much of your practice has been transformed to products or artifacts? Like how much of the soft system students' research or project practice have been transformed to products or artifacts?
Well, I think it's maybe it's two-part question. So my practice and then student at the RCA. So my practice has, so I work a lot in weaving, but I've also been working quite a lot in part of this research that's turned out with a health, in the health sector, a new startup company that's for the past 7 years. And what they've been doing, it's a biomedical company. They've been trying to transplant hair permanently. So what I've been doing for them is actually invent, from this research, I'm going to invent new filaments that are sort of biocompatible for permanent transplantation. So although my research is very much in weave, and this is now sold all over the world in sort of different companies that give those services. So that's, for instance, that's more in polymer science, but that's one of the greatest sort of, I suppose, outreaching product that I've achieved. A lot of my research is very much about creating new structures. And in the RCA, and that's something that actually I want to build on earlier, another question that we have about value. I think we should never underestimate the value of creativity and adaptability. So if we're able to, I mean, a lot of time we assume, particularly in weaving, for instance, you assume that you have to be weaving for a long time to be doing MA in weaving. In many ways, that used to be true for many, many years, and it's still true. But there's a lot of merit, and we do have quite several students that never weaved before. And the merit is that actually you come to this completely fresh-eyed, with no preconceptions of how it works. And that is also that merit of that methodology that we use. And if you're talking about collaborations with other fields and funding, and these are all things that you can build on, but actually it's not always a disadvantage not knowing about how something works, because you can sometimes be even more creative. So a lot of our students, whilst their MA project's been either about readapting or looking differently at textiles and creating new color theories, structural theories from textiles, creating new frames to think about structures in 3D forms, whether continuous or discontinuous, And there's also in the past couple of years, a few years ago, a student that actually didn't use textile at all, weaving at all, but actually she created a whole public exhibition. She's a public artist, and she just uses yarn movements to inform her public installations. So it's. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it's a good answer. I have another question. It's also in Turkish here. I will read it in Turkish. Ayşe Saraç asked.
Ayşe Saraç is asking this question. Hello, as you said, Textile has a great C. There are many branches and areas within these branches. How do you evaluate high printing techniques, which is defined as the printing techniques and traditional printing techniques unification? How should we approach the high-tech printing techniques? Secondly, technology is advancing more and more every day, but on the other hand, there is a return to the nature. Is there any work or study being done to show the existence of craft again? Thank you.
I'm going to invite my colleague Lynn to answer this. Lynn is a champion of craft, really well and truly, and it's very, very dear to her heart. And I'm going to invite her to start with this.
Okay, great, thanks. I suppose it's very much about, so it could be a very personal answer, but my research, my PhD research and my research for a few years afterwards was very much about actually looking at weaving as an engineering tool, very much that quantifiable methods of change look, seeing if something happens with the movement. And actually what I've been doing recently more and more is, as I've mentioned, I'm now also the co-editor of the weaving volume in the upcoming Encyclopedia of World Textiles. And what I'm finding through creating that narrative of what weaving is actually the more, and a lot of my research before that was on it as well, that the more advanced the machines were, the more advanced the technology was and the engineering tools were, the less we were able to interfere and get creative. And this is really where craft about 4 years ago started to be like a huge part of my work, that it's only through craft we're able really to make a meaningful, creative contribution in weaving. It's through the engineering, we're just able, we're always as good, we're a step behind the machine specification. We're always as good as the specification of the machines, but only with actually the more primitive the machines are, the more room there is for creativity. And that's where craft really, really thrives.
Actually, I want to add something to here. So I'm also, studying or working in printing area, especially with hand block printing. Yes, once upon a time it was about the forgotten from especially in Turkey, but now it's getting, there's an awareness towards the handcraft and especially this hand block printing, but it is still used as the art. Actually, it's still in the art area or handcraft area. I didn't see any right now an example which brings the technology and this like hand block printing together, but there's an awareness, and I hope it's not going to be forgotten, this type of handicrafts. So there was a question over here I was about to ask, but it is gone. Let me see that here, if I can see that question. Oh yes, it is in the answered section. So far as I remember, I didn't ask this question, Oğuz Brook question. So let's make this the last question of this panel. And the implementation of computational materials to fashion products has a long past, going back to Diane Dew in 1960s. And we didn't see the commercial adoption of these augmented styles in daily clothing though. Do you think it is possible in the near future? maybe, I don't know, Amy wants to reply this.
I've just also seen the answer from Anne. Yes, I agree that fashion designers need to be much more involved in this design space. But also, I think what we need to consider is since the 1960s, technology has changed so much and come on leaps and bounds. And also designers' access to technology and how we can start to play with, play in this design space. So when we're talking about augmented styles, I mean, we'll also be using theories, example like Jaron Lanier's post-embodic communication and post-digital design, where we can start to experiment with, for example, type of work that I'm developing in soft robotic materials, and how those can be applied in the fashion space.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Actually, this was a very inspiring and exciting panel for me, and the topics that we talk about here today exhibit the wide range of textile applications. So the textiles are now beyond their basic applications. So here I would like to thank all the panelists and Lynn and Amy, Elif to Royal College of Art and to Istanbul Modern, and to all participants. And let me remind you, we will have another panel, and which will be held on March 12th. And if you can, for more information, you can visit the website of Istanbul Modern. And well, thank you again. And let me say, see you at the second panel, maybe.
Thank you so much for all the panelists. It was really inspiring and mind-opening, and hopefully we will see all of you on March 12th. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.